Okay, we are live. All right, good morning, everybody. This is the PT on Ice Daily Show coming at you from Seattle, Washington. I'm here with my friend Maddie at Ballard CrossFit in Seattle. And today is Fitness Athlete Friday. So we are going to be talking about anterior shoulder pain in the CrossFitter today. I'm looking at this camera, this is Instagram. Looking at this camera, it's Facebook. So bear with me as we try to maneuver these cameras and show you guys a few things. Fitness Athlete Friday, this is my first time on Fridays, but CrossFit is actually how I got involved with ice. So I'm excited to be able to share with you some of my favorite ways to treat these athletes over the next coming months and future. First, a few housekeeping elements. You guys all watched the drop of 19.3, so make sure you join us on Mondays for the roundtable. We'll be having a lot of the ICE faculty who's participating in the Open meet on Facebook, and we'll do it live, but you can watch the recording, and just kind of talking about our experience with the Open and how that went for us. We have a new element this year of strict handstand push-ups. I know Maddie's excited for that. So we'll be really curious to see what happens and how people do. I unfortunately sprained my ankle the other day, and so I will be doing my best, and it'll just be all taped up, and we'll see if I can get through all of the ankle dominant stuff and then get to that wall. Okay, second piece of housekeeping, virtual ice is open for $29 a month. That is 24 CEUs, and it's weekly sessions, hour long on Tuesdays. Again, you can watch the recordings. It's one night a week where you're getting a lot of information from the ICE faculty. It's really worth your time and money, and people have been really happy with that program. So go ahead and sign up for that. And then also make sure that you're signed up for our Hump Day Hustling email. That you can find if you go to ptonice.com and just scroll to the bottom of that page and sign up for that. It's not spam, just 5 weekly items that we think that you should take a look at, articles and Instagram posts, things like that. Last piece of housekeeping, the sampler. It's happening in Vegas, April 6th and 7th. And it will be a group of the ICE faculty talking about their specialties, right? And literally a sampler from the ICE faculty. So we'll hope to see you there. There'll be a lot of fun events going on in addition to the continuing education. Okay, so we are going to talk about, like I said, anterior shoulder pain in the CrossFitter. If you've been watching the posts that I've done this year in 2019 on hip, we have a similar concept here. So I want you to understand a little more fully the concept of anterior glide syndromes. So this is best explained by Dr. Shirley Sarman, and it's best understood in the shoulder and in the hip, okay? So what is an anterior glide syndrome? Let's talk about that in regard to the shoulder, but we can relate this to the hip, and I'll be talking about this at the sampler, regarding the hip, just FYI. All right, so what happens in anterior glide syndrome is that the front of the capsule, the anterior part of the capsule, is more flexible. Okay, it's more flexible than the posterior capsule. And in CrossFitters, almost everything we do is pulling, whether that is stabilizing with our lats in a deadlift or at the first pull of an Oli lift, whether that's pull-ups, ring rows, rowing on an erg. We do a lot more pulling than we do pushing. And that is just inherent in our sport, and that's not a bad thing, but it's something to be aware of. And so what happens is that all of the tissues on the backside of the shoulder, can you take your section off for me? On the backside of the shoulder are stronger and they're tight, they're more restricted. So we're talking about like teres minor, we're talking about infraspinatus, we're talking about lats. So I'm gonna have you spin this a little bit. And then scooch toward me. Ooh, no, scoot forward. Okay, perfect. Okay, so these structures in the back of her shoulder are gonna be more tight and more stiff. So what happens is rather than them pulling that humerus back into place, which sometimes we inherently feel like, oh, that would be happening if they're tight, it should be retracted, or that the humerus should be sitting more posteriorly. But because of the attachments to the tubercle, what happens is actually we get medial rotation, and I visualize it like a trampoline, like pushing that humeral head forward. Okay. Additionally, we will often see tightness or stiffness, or I won't even say strength, it's more stiffness in the pec. So again, that's shoving that humeral head forward. Okay. Finally, we have probably overactive lats. Now again, that is inherent to this sport. We're doing a lot of lat activation, and that's a good thing. In fact, I treat a lot of CrossFitters who aren't activating their lats, and that's problematic. But if you think about where the lats attach, I'm gonna reach under your armpit with a cold hand. They attach in the front of that shoulder, right? And so they're gonna pull that arm backwards, causing that humeral head to shift forward even more. Okay, so that's essentially what we're talking about with an anterior glide syndrome. They are not necessarily stronger in the front and being pulled in the front. They are merely tight in the back, and then there's not enough room for that posterior glide to happen, or it's too stiff. Okay, so put some questions in the comments if you have any about that, because I'm happy to talk about that more. But like I said, this is best explained by Dr. Sarman, and she's got a great textbook on this that many people are aware of, movement impairment syndromes. So read up on that a little bit. But I think it's a concept that we forget about a lot. And what happens with these athletes is they come in with anterior shoulder pain. So I'm gonna have you sit back. They have pain in the front. So perhaps biceps tendonitis, maybe they have a pec strain, just soreness in the front of that capsule. And often what they're doing is, and you did this at first, they're like stretching the front of their shoulder, right? So they're like on the ring and they're trying to really stretch out. Yeah, Maddie did that for weeks. So they're trying to stretch it out because that's what's sore, right? So patients and even therapists, we tend to think like, what hurts? Stretch it. And if you're getting to know my style, I'm like not into stretching that much. I'm okay with a sleeper stretch with these folks. So I'm gonna actually adjust my cameras a little bit and have Maddie demonstrate that, and I'll tell you why I'm okay with this. So Maddie, scoot your body toward me. Yep, perfect. And then let's do this one. Okay, so she's on her side. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, she's on her side and her body weight is on her shoulder. Okay, she's at about 90 degrees here and about 90 degrees at the elbow, and she's gently, go ahead, she's gently gonna push her forearm down toward her hips. So she's getting a stretch in the back of the shoulder. Do you feel that in the back? Yeah. If you're worried about their head, you put a foam roller under them. Okay, and then I have them hold that for about 90 seconds. Okay, come on out of that. So that will be the one stretch that I'm okay with in the shoulder when they have this sort of anterior positioning issue. I'm also okay with them putting a lacrosse ball back there, kind of using the wall to get back in there. It helps if they move their arm out of the way so that when that ball's back there, they're actually getting into the teres and into that infraspinatus. Okay, so this also happens, again, because we're overly pulling with our lats. So we want to get these patients to understand that just because the lats are here, and that's what we want them to feel all the time, doesn't mean that that's what we want them to feel when they're pushing overhead. So what lives here is the serratus, right? And that helps us with upward rotation. So a lot of times when I'm trying to get people to do overhead work, like a handstand or pressing overhead, they are doing, I know it's hard to see with my black shirt, so here, raise your arm. Mm-hmm. So, scoot toward me. This ring. Okay, so what they do when they're pressing overhead is they retract. So pull your shoulder blade down. Yeah, and they set it down thinking that that's a more stable position. And I know for years as a physical therapist, that's what I told people to do. But in fact, what we want to do is think about upward rotation and reaching, not from the trap, but from the lower portion of the shoulder blade. Okay, so reaching up. All right, come back down. So often, again, what you're going to see in these patients is a depressed scapula. So not that they don't want to be using their lats, but they are overly pulling those lats down all the time. Okay, so when they're going overhead, they need to be able to go the opposite way. All right, and then finally, I really think that a forward posture from use of technology will contribute to this. So if they are, and you work in chemistry, so Maddie is constantly under a hood doing experiments, so she can be very forward. So all of these factors are going to contribute to a patient getting, again, this anterior glide of the humerus. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to stretch it. We're going to stop, right? So we're not going to poke the bear. Just because something hurts doesn't mean that that is the problematic area. In fact, in many cases, it's the posterior structures. So when will these patients feel pain in the front? Well, they're going to feel it for sure with dips, push-ups, bench press, everything. But then also they're going to feel it with overhead, because if this humerus isn't centered very well, then it's going to get a superior movement. What is the job of the rotator cuff? A large part of what the rotator cuff does is it anchors that humerus down. It centers that down into the socket so that when we raise our arm up, it doesn't cause impingement. So essentially, in addition to this anterior glide, they're also getting impingement. So they'll feel that with overhead positions, they'll feel that with kipping, because if it doesn't feel very stable, they're gonna feel that when they're swinging through. But today we're gonna talk about how to address centering this. And again, I am a big fan of functional treatment and getting people moving in their sport, right? But until they learn how to anchor this back, it's really hard to do that. So we're gonna start with centering the humerus, and then we're gonna translate that position into a hold on the rings, which is why we're sitting on the floor in this weird position. The 6 a.m. class is about to start doing 19.3, so we're trying to cram this in before the gym gets too loud. Okay, so I'm gonna adjust the cameras. Maddie's gonna go on her back, and what we're gonna try to do with this exercise is we're trying to uptrain the subscapularis. So again, that subscapularis is probably weaker than some of the other structures that we've talked about. So we have an imbalance. And because its job, again, is to sort of depress that humeral head, then we want to engage that muscle to get it to center that and anchor that humerus in place. Okay, so Maddie's gonna go on her side. We're gonna do her left arm just for ease of videoing. And I'm using a small, normal size foam roller under her elbow. So you're gonna go this way. Straight. Kind of angled that way. Your elbow. Okay, this camera can see. And you're with us. Okay, perfect. All right, so I normally would sit on the same side as my patient or as the arm that they're working on, but I'm gonna be on this side so that you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. So let's bring your elbow here. So it doesn't need to be beyond 90, about 90 degrees out from their body or a little bit less. Okay, and then she's propped up on a foam roller so that that humerus kind of naturally sinks down into the socket. Okay, I will normally put my hand underneath her shoulder blade, and I'm gonna cue Maddie to punch the fist toward the sky so that she can anchor that humerus down. So if we think like it's a lever, if the elbow goes forward, the humeral head goes back. What's gonna happen with most of these athletes is they're going to try to do a lat contraction. Can you show what that looks like? Yeah, so they're pulling down this way. So I don't want that. That is merely pulling the humeral head forward, right? So instead, I'm gonna put my hand right here and I want pressure down on my fingers. Beautiful, yeah. Sometimes they can palpate underneath their, or on the anterior side of their scapula with their other hand, and they can feel that contraction, yeah. It's not really showing on the video, but. Okay, so once she feels that, the sensation that I get when I do this is I feel like my shoulder blade is flattening to the ground. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I feel it.
And then once you educate them about what it feels like when they contract their lats, they'll understand the difference. Once they can anchor that, go ahead. But now I'm gonna have her bring her forearm down toward her hips just until the point where she can control this. Good, and then hold about 10 seconds. So that's a great kind of a mental awareness for centering that Again, we want to translate this to real movement though. So we're going to go to the rings. Let's see where my rings. They're there. Okay. Let's angle this. Oops. There we go. Okay, Maddie. So what Maddie's going to do is pop up into a ring support. So she is thinking, can you hold that for a second? Okay. So she's thinking rotating her hands into external rotation or armpits forward. She's straight elbows as much as she can be. She's pulling those rings into her body. Oops, can't see me. Okay, come on, back down. Okay, so a ring support is a really good place to start. But again, most of these patients, if they're having pain with dips, we need to figure out how they can go into a dip without shearing that, I almost said femoral, that humeral head forward. Okay, pop that up. Okay, so now Maddie's gonna think about lowering eccentrically into her dip position. Can you show the bad way? So she's gonna just dump forward, yeah. That is what we normally see, is where her shoulders are just dumping forward. Here, I'm gonna move this camera fully. Okay, all right, so do that again. They're not controlling, they're not staying centered, and they're just falling forward. So instead, drop that down. What I want them to think about is serratus activation. So even though my arms are down by my side, I'm gonna press my body up out of those rings, maintaining all of those points of control. So do that again, and think about pushing down, push. Yep, and now she's eccentrically lowering with her tricep. Okay, so she's actually staying anchored in the socket and lowering down. Do the one we don't want again, Maddie. Forward. You'll see her body falling forward. Okay, relax. And it doesn't feel good. No. Right? Okay. So I want you guys to practice those. Practice them on yourself, maybe. You can think about that with push-ups too. I know I've used up a lot of your time, so I don't want to continue too much longer. But it's that same idea of thinking about controlling the centering and then using the movers, right? So we have stabilizers and we have movers. And our shoulder does not need to be dumping forward out of the socket to get into these positions. Okay, I hope that's helpful. I know it's a lot of information, but I do see this a lot, and I think that these are great ways to get our athletes back on track with getting that humerus centered. So again, post comments if you have any questions or other ideas. We'd love to hear from you, and have a great 19.3. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, Maddie. And